There are some forms of art that are so overtly bad that their outright hideousness becomes their one redeeming feature. Movies like Viva Las Vegas, lounge singers like Robert Goulet, and Elvis impersonators fall into this category of entertainingly bad art known as camp. If you're going to churn out bad art, you should at least shoot for camp as some form of redemption. Sick Burn Cut, a recently released novella by Northwest writer Duran Ludd, doesn't even have the redeeming quality of being this sort of bad. All the potential is there. It's a story full of low-lifers, violent cross-dressers, and weapon-toting horny women. But even with all this to work with, Sick Burn Cut falls short of being readable for two reasons. First is Ludd's style. Ludd's writing leans towards the stream of consciousness mode that can be so engaging if well done, as in the cases of, say, Kurt Vonnegut or Tom Robbins. But in this case, it seems as if Ludd spewed out one draft and then somehow circumvented the entire editing process, resulting in an end product that metaphorically resembles a candy necklace which has spent a day in the clutches of a 3-year-old. Sure, it's strung together, but it's so disgusting that no one wants to eat it. This comes as a surprise, as the publishing company, Semiotext, is near the top of the ladder in the small press industry. Usually Semiotext maintains a consistent level of quality, but it looks like somehow this one got past them. The second and ultimately fatal flaw is that Ludd seems to be serious about his characters. Perhaps if he had aimed a little more towards camp and a little less towards convincing us that these characters could actually exist, he would be more successful in allowing his readers to take the leap of faith that is so essential to good fiction. The protagonist is Mary, a 31-year-old man with a revolver and a cheap cotton dress. Mary makes his living by allowing people to do very nasty things to his body, and he hangs around with a gang of ruin-dwelling homosexual yuppie haters. Mary has a surly, swarthy Mideasterner boyfriend named Saeed Hussien. Get it? And as if Ludd thinks that perhaps his readers won't pick up on this blatant reference to that other surly Mideasterner of a similar name, oh, who could that be? He spells the name out in full every time the character is mentioned. The plot muddles on, riddled with sex, violence, and endless late night in the Seattle rain scenes. In fact, those three elements seem to be the plot of this book. First, there's a little violent sex, then some rain, then some sexy violence, then some violence sans sex, a little more rain, a little more sex, etc. Ludd keeps the characters who are not engaging in wet and or violent sex busy by having them swear and curse at one another. For example, Mary turns to the door, then pauses, his back to Saeed Hussien. What? You don't think I can get us someone to buy us some martinis? When haven't I gotten us drinks when I put my mind to it? It's Sunday night. Who's going to be there on a Sunday night? Whatever. Mary shrugs and walks to the fireplace and studies his reflection. Saeed Hussien stands up. All fucking right. Let me change my shoes. It's pouring out there. There is so much of this distracting and simplistic dialogue that the point of the novel is lost, obscured by the poor use of language and pointless action. There's a vague theme of sacrifice and redemption that peers out from behind the skirts of profanity, but it is very vague indeed. For those who would like to judge Sick number and cut for themselves. It's available at Powell's Books in the alternative press section. Or you can spend the $6 on a cheap fifth of tequila, drink the whole thing in one night, and wait until the hangover kicks in, and get the same effect as reading the book. Or if you don't believe that writing this bad can actually get published and booked for readings, Lud will appear at Powell's on March 27th at 7:30 p.m. to prove you wrong. facing forward. He nods his head to the rhythm of one of the songs on the cassette player. His legs, which had been draped over one of the arms of the chair, swing out, and he slams his heels to the floor, stands up, goes to the mirror over the fireplace, and reapplies lipstick. He runs his fingers through his hair and wishes he had somewhere to go for a trim. He could let Saeed Hussien have a go at it, but the last time they did that, Mary's hair was a mess. Mary looks at Saeed Hussien in the mirror. Saeed Hussien is concentrating on one of the magazines that had been brought up for him. For a while, Saeed Hussien had tried to ration himself, but he has no restraint when it comes right down to it and devours them cover to cover as fast as he can. The hair will have to do for now. Mary walks to the chair where their coats are draped. When Mary starts to put on his parka and picks up his purse, Saeed Hussien drops the magazine. Mary looks at him. I'm bored and I'm sick with this pit. I'm going to the home port. Mary pulls his parka tightly around him and clutches his handbag to his chest. Saeed Hussien thinks about it a second and then says, "We're broke. There's a little over $4 in my purse. We'll have a couple of beers at least." Mary turns to the door and then pauses, his back to Saeed Hussien. "What? You don't think I can get someone to buy us martinis? When haven't I gotten us drinks when I put my mind to it? It's Sunday night. Who's going to be there on a Sunday night?" "Whatever." Mary shrugs, walks to the fireplace, and again studies his reflection. Saeed Hussien stands up. "All fucking right. Let me change my shoes. It's pouring out there." Mary uses a dampened thumb and forefinger to extinguish one of the candles next to his cousin's Edith's photograph. As he pulls his hand away, it bumps the candle on the other side of the photo. The liquefied wax pooled around the wick gutters off to one side and splatters across the already multicolored mosaic of melted down candles that has built up around the photograph. No one is there. No sailors, no other likely punters to cajole or intimidate into buying a round or two. It is still early, but you can pretty much suss out a place right away as to how busy it's likely to get. 2 beers, Rainier's, is $2.50 plus the tip and the rest of the change to feed the jukebox. They sit with backs to the wall in one of the big circular booths at the rear of the lounge. A few locals and an occasional sailor drifts back and forth from the restaurant and the nude dancers. They glance at and then ignore the Arab and the transvestite in the back. Near the jukebox is a table of 5 women. All of them are waitresses at either the home port or one of the other cocktail lounges along 2nd. All are over 50, with their big hairdos and polyester uniforms and casual wear. They talk loudly and drink steadily. They either are winding down from their shift or getting fortified for their upcoming one. Squirm around and smoke. An hour later, the beers are near their end, very warm and not at all refreshing at this point. A couple of knots of sailors have set themselves up at the bar and the 2 pool tables, but the place remains empty feeling. The music selections on the jukebox shift from Tony Bennett and Frank Sinatra, the waitresses had punched in, to rock and roll and current pop hits. The waitresses are gone now. Even though there are a few sailors, the people who make their living off them start to show up. Mary gets a little feeling like maybe if he plays it right, he can get something out of one of these boys. But with so few of them, the sailors are not as prone to giving him any more than a semi-curious look. No need with the ratio of prostitutes to sailors, so much in the sailors' favor. Mary uses his compact and then intently searches the tiny crowd, trying to make eye contact with someone. 3 of the sailors are home port regulars and recognize Mary, mostly just with quick looks and jokes among buddies, but one of them ventures a hello. Saeed Hussien finishes the tepid backwash of his beer and goes over to the pool tables to see if he can hustle up a game. Finally it happens. A group of shipmates Mary knows settles into the large booth next to him. They too are regulars, and Mary makes a point of greeting each by name. Once the liquor flows and Mary snaps off a string of amusing vulgarities and quips, they make a show of inviting him to their table and chatting him up in loud, masculine voices. When the booze has done its work, they buy him a couple of rounds and make only half-kidding passes at him. Mary sits there and takes it all, the drinks and the crude flirting. He has no intention in ending up in bed with any of them, but whatever works to enable a penniless drag queen to get drunk is just fine with him. On their way out of the lounge to catch the midnight show of alleged new and fresh dancing girls, one of the sailors Mary's been sitting with slips him $5, with a wink and a leer and a promise of something really special someday. Mary smiles at him and his mind rolls his eyes. Yeah, sure. Special like dirt is special. Mary gets up, smooths his skirt and saunters to the bar, checking out the rest of the customers. Leaning on the bar, waiting for the bartender, Mary dishes with two prostitutes who frequent the home port. Once Mary has his drink and some coin change, he loiters at the jukebox. He sees Saeed Hussien has found himself a game with two sailors at one of the pool tables. Mary is torn between sticking with the rock and roll and pop mood that's been on since things got busier, or punching in Patsy Cline and Hank Williams to see what happens. He defers to a sailor for the moment. After watching what the sailor selects, Mary decides to stick with rock and roll. It takes Mary a long time to search through all the real dreck on the box. So he ends up letting a cute but impatient sailor make the last selection for him. As it turns out, the evening's crowd is very temporary. It doesn't last much past 1 a.m. But by this hour, Mary has caught a pleasing alcohol buzz. The boredom was never truly relieved, but he managed to get tipsy. Mary leans back in the booth, letting his head droop over to one side. He shakes the coins in his right hand. $2.10. Enough for one last beer with tip and two selections on the jukebox. Mary glances over at Saeed Hussien and then at the bar. There are three sailors leaning forward, elbows on the bar, their butts spread over three stools in a most unflattering manner. The two on either side leaning inward toward the man in the middle, periodic sloppy laughter from their huddle. With his fresh beer in hand, Mary heads to the jukebox. Saeed Hussien intercepts. He has the two sailors he was playing pool with in tow. Mary, this is Lewis, and this is Davy. Mary grabs hands and gives them his vice-squeeze handshake. They respond half-heartedly. One of them does attempt to smile at him, so Mary decides to give them a chance. They go back to the booth and all four slide in. Mary on the far left, then Saeed Hussien, then Lewis, then Davy. Lewis is from Detroit and tries to come off with a face of urban confidence and cool. Davy is from a suburb of Sacramento and just watches and drinks beer. Generally, men in the Navy are younger than men in the Merchant Marine unless they are officers. So Mary thinks of Navy sailors with thoughts of youth. Unsophisticated but eager for experience. Pushy, hormonal. These two are nowhere near Mary's 31 years and probably not even Saeed Hussein's 23. Lewis is very talkative, his head bobbing back and forth between Saeed Hussein's face and Mary's, muscles in his face working furiously as he boasts and chatters. 2 a.m. comes around and Lewis manages to convince Davy to stay with him and to go to the little house on the north end of Lowell. Lewis puts the money out for a fifth of Jack Daniels from the bartender, and the four of them trudge up 2nd Avenue. Saeed Hussien uses some of Davy's top tobacco and bits of hashish to roll some keef. Lewis keeps on with the prattle. Now it's back to his days in high school. Mary is always sort of shocked when people expose how meaningless and dull their existences have been by extolling high school as the best years of their lives. Rather frightening when you think about it. Mary pours everyone JDs. Lewis finally catches on that no one gives a shit about high school and all his buddies and all the dreary squalor he likes to think of as adventure. He shuts up and takes a long drink. He looks from Mary to Saeed Hussein. You, guys? Lewis looks back and forth from Mary to Saeed Hussein, unsure if his gender terminology is acceptable. They ignore the question in his tone. You two live here long? Everett, I mean? It's just that you, seem to know your way around, but, you two kind of look at a place in Everett. Know what I mean? No, we haven't been here long, but too long. Mary cracks up at this. Saeed Hussein manages a smile. Lewis looks confused and Davy is bored. Mary hands Lewis the spliff, exhales, and waves his hand around. This is a friend's place. We're house sitting. Davy gets a doubtful, uneasy look on his chubby face. He looks to Lewis for reassurance and then takes a strong swig from the jar he is using as a glass. Lewis is confused again. He looks into his drink and then bursts out laughing and pounds the tabletop with the palm of his hand. Mary and Saeed Hussein grab for their own drinks as his pounding shakes the flimsy table. You guys are too much, fucking A. Hey, let me pour another round. He grabs the neck of the fifth and splashes whiskey in all 4 glasses. Actually, 2 glasses and 2 jars. For the first time that night, Lewis holds Mary's gaze for longer than 2 seconds. Lewis nudges Davy as he says, shit, if he was a girl, shit. He gives Davy the conspiratorial wink and nod, and he looks Mary up and down. If you were a girl, I'd be in your pants so fast, before you could say, dirty dancing. Mary stops chewing his gum. Saeed Hussein is choking on a mouthful of whiskey. Without looking at Saeed Hussein, Mary reaches over and squeezes his leg. But honey, I'm not wearing pants. Lewis blinks, then laughs, and again jostles the table with his pounding. Davy doesn't react. If he knew how to sneer, and if he didn't think it was too faggoty, he would have. Lewis stops laughing and is obviously restless, shifting around in his seat. One hand is on his drink and the other is under the table, squeezing his crotch. Saeed Hussein sees this and tries not to stare. Lewis says, shit, I wish there were more good-looking chicks in this town. And no offense, guys, but I could sure use some of that soft and round stuff. Saeed Hussein wonders what this man really wants hanging around with them. Saeed Hussein thinks of the home port. Tonight there were at least 5 or 6 women in the place who would have done something quick and effective for 20, 30 bucks. I mean, shit, for $5, Lewis could have gotten into the go-go show, sat in one of the booths that ringed the stage, and if he was discreet, jack off. Sailors are always looking for a good time. Saeed Hussein wonders if they ever have any. Saeed Hussein knows sailors sometimes carry a lot of cash and are always acting horny. Saeed Hussein is buddy-buddy with one of the prostitutes, Marine. And he figures between Marine and Mary they could get these boys in a position where they would be easy to rip off. But Mary likes Lewis. He likes him in the passing way, and Mary appreciates men who are not afraid of him, but who are not a part of his everyday life. Lewis is the kind of man who really hasn't taken care of himself, but his body is still young enough and awash with hormones to strongly signify masculinity. Not that youth and testosterone amount to a whole lot, really, but on Lewis, at age 21, his plainness and youth work for him, image-wise. Saeed Hussein knows this is how Mary sees Lewis, but Saeed Hussein really does not understand it. He never bothers with all that sorting and characterizing of people that Mary seems to find so vital in delineating the world. If a person isn't someone Saeed Hussein has allowed into a small circle of friends, then he doesn't bother to remember them, let alone contemplate or try and understand them. These outsiders do not signify. These outsiders do not even signify nothing to him. They do not signify. Sometimes they are stupid or mean or cruel, and he has to kill them.